All right. So according to my YouTubes, we are we are now live. I was told I shouldn't say stuff like that. So anyway, according to the control panel here, we are now live, and it looks like I got that under control as to that little testing bit. I finally found the button to not auto start my live stream. So, yay! So here we are on this. Let me make sure everything is. Yep, here we go. Good, good, good. So, as always, here we are live from Denver. It is May 3rd in the year of our Lord, 2026. Our Lord. And it is a relatively balmy 71 degrees here in Denver right now. So I thought I would dress appropriately when I can. We've also gotten rain and a lot of weird, Denver weather is very bipolar. It is very all over the place. One day it's extreme here, the next day it can be very extreme over here. And if you just look at the, weekly forecasts for our area, you'll see exactly what I mean. It'll bounce between, a high of 41 on Tuesday and then 83 on Wednesday, and things like that. So we roll with it. But, I don't know why this is happening at all. I have no idea. Nobody does, really. It's all in the hands of, the gods as to how the weather is going to turn out and what's happening with our climate, obviously. No, nothing anybody could do anything about. There wouldn't be anything like that. There wouldn't be any technology or useful, lifestyle changes we could make that would have any effect on this at all. So we just have to kind of put up with it and roll with the wild, crazy weather and how wild and crazy it's going to get. So anyway, I'm in a little bit of a ranty mood today, but I'm going to really, really try to keep myself contained. That never really bodes well for me, and I always prefer to try to keep things a little chill, a little professional. Let's switch over to the chat box here, and try to be as reasonable as I can about stuff. Now let's go ahead and share some. Let's do our usual routine here. Now that we're live and going, let's go ahead and share some FigCam. This is our little bundle of furry joy, and you can see he is getting a little furry. I love it when he's 9 months and 2 days old now today. And he is just so furry. He's so fun when he gets like that, because it kind of he's such a tiny little dog, and the fur actually does make him look a little bit bigger. And you can see there he is. He does the little gnawing thing, but he's getting so much better now. He's so different from how he has been in the past with that. He's learning that we don't want to be gnawed on. But we love his little licks and kisses and all of that. You can see Mel's feet there. And this is him just roaming around in the house. This morning, this was literally about 15 minutes ago that I shot all of this. And so there's our FigCam for this week. Hope you enjoy that. I just cannot get enough of this little guy. He is just so bonded with us now, and there's just, you all know. If you know, you know, right? I don't need to, articulate it fully. Just, our little Fig Newtonius, Sir Fignitius Newtonius. Anyway, we're having so much fun with him, and he's just such a joy to be around. And he's so different. One thing I will say is he's so different from Benson. Such a distinctly different dog in almost every way. And of course, because we got him younger and not from a hoarder house as a rescue, he doesn't have, some of that baggage, and he's also younger, so he's more impressionable, more willing to learn, more willing to kind of go with what we're saying, and he adopts to the schedule so quickly, and he's so smart. I really only have to tell him some things. I only have to tell him a few times, and he really starts picking up on it quickly, which I just love. I just love that, because then you can kind of have these You can kind of have these little chats with them, and and they're fun. Oh, thank you for the acknowledgement on my Reddit post. I wanted to actually lead today with a couple things. So let's go ahead and get into it. In terms of, let me get the Q&A box set up, because I failed to do that here. So start a little Q&A, please. Put your questions. Always trying to misspell it. Here. All right. Boom. All right. So you should now have a place to put questions for me if you want to throw them at me. Now would be the time to go ahead and start filling that up while I deliver a couple of thoughts about some things that I wrote this week. There were 2 articles that I wrote, and I'm in the middle of writing a 3rd one right now. I'm trying to, maybe I'm just hyper-focusing right now, right? Maybe it's just an ADHD thing, and maybe this will pass, but I don't think so, because I am a writer, and that is what I like to do most. All the videos I do, usually I write them first, right? And then you make the video. But just focusing on the writing and trying to improve the writing, work on the writing as writing for writing, meant to be consumed that way. I'm kind of working in that direction a little bit now that I've got my 2nd book out, and it's out there. And I hope I will. Let me plug real fast, because I forget to say this every week. But if you've read my book or are reading my book, I really would like your feedback. Please do drop a review on Amazon. I think there's like 4 of them posted right now, which is not a lot. I'd like to get a lot more reviews, not for engagement. Yeah, I want engagement. I want Amazon to think people are reading my book. But more importantly, I really want your feedback. I want to know what you think, and what questions or issues, or, did I miss something? Did I miss on something? Anything like that, I really would like to know. I don't want, carping criticism, but I do want intelligent feedback. Let's put it that way. So anyway, if you have that or have been reading my book or like it, please do let me know via Amazon reviews what you think. I don't have any other platform to post reviews of my book or give me feedback on it than Amazon reviews, really. You don't have to order the book, by the way, through Amazon. It's available through Ingram Spark, so you can go to a bookstore and order it. You could go and order it yourself through Ingram. So if you don't want to feed the Amazon machine, you do not have to in order to support me or my work. And I've been asked a number of times, and I will have in a few days, I will have hard copies of my book here at home. I've ordered about 10 copies. So if you want a signed copy sent to you, I am more than happy to do that. And you can just contact me via askchrisshelton@gmail.com. You can always reach out to me at that email, and we can arrange that. It'll be $50 plus postage, right, for me to send it out to you. And that'll be, I think that's fair. Okay, so book stuff aside, I wrote 2 essays this week. One of them had to do with the TikTok speedruns, and I posted that on Reddit. I thought, I posted it. I have a blog now on a website that I have. It's chrissheltonmsc.org. If you go to the chrissheltonmsc.org, that's my website, and you can contact me through that website, of course. And I started posting my articles on there, so they are there also. Just a typical, simple, very, very, very simple WordPress template that I use to put the site together. So it's nothing fancy at all, but I'll be developing it as time goes on. But anyway, you can see my written articles there too. But this one I posted on Reddit, and it's basically a sort of early days analysis of the TikTok speedruns from a sort of meta point of view, a sort of like, okay, let's go back and look at this, not from inside, but from, compare it to the 2008 Project Chanology anonymous protests. They started in what looked and felt very much like the same energy and the same vibes as the TikTokers right now. It was a game, it was trolling, it was stuff to do just because it was fun to torment Scientology. We know they're a destructive cult. They're the bad guys, we're the good guys. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy, let's go attack them, right? And it'll be a lot of fun, and we'll have all the lulls, as they used to say. I was on the RPF when that was all going down, by the way, so I was not around to see a lot of that, except for the fact that it was happening. We could see protesters marching around PAC week after week after week. But we didn't really, we were not as involved with it or engaged with it as the rest of the base must have been, because I was on the RPF. But even after I got off the RPF in 2009, I think it was, there were still protests happening, because I went up to Seattle, and that's where, if you see film of me in a Sea Org outfit on the internet, that's where it comes from. It was an anonymous protester filming me going at Seattle. So I engaged with the anonymous protest from within Scientology to that degree, but after I left Scientology, I found out all about it. I mean, everything. I watched documentaries. I read. I went to Why We Protest. I really dug into what that was all about. Not because I'm trying to say I'm some expert on it. I just want you guys to know I went back and looked into it, and then I have been, doing a bit of compare and contrast of that with the modern TikTok speedruns, and they are different. The basis of this activity now is a game. It's if I say this, it'll be seen as a derogatory statement, but I see it as a factual statement that it's LARPing, right? It's live action role playing. It's kids playing a game in real life with their real body rather than an avatar or video game figure, right? And thinking that they're getting big bonus points and, getting further than anybody else, and comparing their victories, and they're looking for the big bosses. This is the language that they use in discussing these speedruns. It's all gamified language. So not hard, not much of a stretch to say they're LARPing. I mean, it's just kind of obvious. And there isn't, what I wrote in my article is not a judgment of that. It's just sort of an analysis point. It's like, okay, well, that's what's happening right now. And it could turn over into something more real, more serious, more activist-minded activity if these kids were to actually look at the history and look at what Scientology actually is, as opposed to a big boss. Then they're going to turn a corner and Tom Cruise is going to be there, right? Or some celebrity is going to be there, and they're going to have a moment, right? If that's not activism, that's gaming. It's a different thing. So if they want to convert it over, well, that's what Anonymous did. Anonymous changed the energy. They changed the vibe of what they were doing because of a moral component that entered into it, right? That's how I talk about stuff. Sorry if that sounds all academic or whatever, but that's the only way I have to describe it, is a purpose and meaning and something substantial came into the anonymous space, and they decided, there were always factions in the anonymous movement. There were the trolls versus what they called the moral fags. That was the term they used. I'm not trying to be derogatory or anti-LGBT in saying that. That was the name they had for the people who were more crusader types, who were more trying to actually bring awareness to the world about what an awful, destructive cult Scientology actually is. And then there were just the trolls who just wanted to troll for the sake of trolling. But so the moral side, the moral component of it, kind of took over for a good long time. And Anonymous did something that was truly impressive, really, truly impressive in terms of a mass organization movement that had a real effect on Scientology and its operations from that point forward, and more importantly, had an impact on the public perception of Scientology. And when you can do that, then you are doing, the Lord's work, right? Then you're doing something actually substantial. And the TikTokers are not doing that, right? They're not bringing any real awareness or new information or new levels of awareness to the public about Scientology. They're just riding the coattails of all the work we did. And then they blame us and tell us that, all the work we did over the last 30 years was meaningless. And that what they've accomplished is the only thing that, is really matters, and all the work we've been doing doesn't. And I'm here to tell you that that's just a bullshit thing to say, and it's really not cool. That was one of the reasons I was really kind of ranty this morning, is because I was reading some of that on Reddit, and it just really pisses me off. You don't have to shit on everybody who came before to think that you're something. That's not necessary. And it's a very childish thing to do. So, of course, kids are doing it. So, whatever, I get it, but I needed to comment on it because it's just not right. That none of what is happening on TikTok right now would mean anything if we hadn't done all the work. And I mean you guys too, because I know a lot of you guys have been in this game for a long time. It's not just me. It's not just Leah. It's not just Mike. It's all of us. And I've said from the get-go that I'm standing on the shoulders of giants in the work I do. I am not any kind of trendsetter or, milestone setter or, amazing person in this. I am not riding coattails because I am coming up with my own original work, but I am building on the work of what came before me. And if that work hadn't been done, it would be impossible for me to have done what I've done. And that's something I think is a worthy and necessary acknowledgement, and I just don't get this whole attitude of let's just shit on everybody who came before because you guys didn't do anything, Anyway, rant over on that. So that was that essay, and that's out there now. And it's long, it's kind of long. It's about 2,000 words. So, maybe some people will read it and most won't. But I thought I would just throw it out there as something to offer, and I'm going to do more of that. I've got a lot of ideas of essays and stuff to write, just like I have a lot of ideas for videos to make, right? And so it'll take me whatever time it takes for me to get that pounded out. But writing is so much faster and so much easier for me than video making. And as I've been saying for a long time, I'm trying to sort of shift my focus over to writing as the means by which I get out my content, while I continue keeping my YouTube channel going. So you should expect to see more from me. And I'm hoping, wouldn't it be nice? Wouldn't it be great? Wouldn't it be cool if we could raise the level of the conversation on this topic in the X space online? Because right now there's a lot of really amazing academic or insightful or substantial work out there that is being done in the X-cult space, not really in the X-Scientology space a lot, but in the X-cult space, there is amazing work being done. There are X-cult members who have done analyses and breakdowns and very, very deep thinking work on cults, coercive control, and how it all works, and the social forces involved, the personal psychology of it. There's a lot of really great stuff out there. There's not a lot of that in the ex-Scientology space. It's a space that is, at least the online space is very noisy, very confusing, and it just bounces people out of it who otherwise might be interested in getting on board and helping. So I thought, I'll do my part to try to raise the level of discourse, right? The level of conversation about this topic and see if it makes any impact or not, right? Maybe people want to keep it at, the 5th grade level, but I'd like to talk a little deeper about some things in this area, and some analysis, some thoughts, some predictions, some looks back at the past, but not. I don't want to become the Scientology historian. I'm not trying to do that, but I would just like to think a bit more deeply and talk a bit more, more thoughtfully about this subject. Okay, point made. The other thing that I wrote this week was just posted today on Alexander Barnes Ross's Apostate Alex's blog, and it's about the coercive control legislation in around the world, and specifically in the UK. There is an effort now, Alex is on board with, a very serious effort, and one that is really timely and really good, to get the law in the UK that covers coercive control, that makes it illegal to engage in a repeating pattern of abusive behavior against your spouse, domestic partner, significant other. That's on the books. That's been on the books for a number of years now, almost 10. No, over 10. So very little has been done with that law in courts of law yet to prosecute domestic violence offenders or people who coercively control their domestic partners. But there's some, right? It's you can't control it. It just kind of rolls out the way it rolls out. But what you can control is the wording of the law. And right now, the law is narrowly confined to just the domestic violence, intimate partner violence sphere. That's where they've defined coercive control to happen. But it doesn't just happen there, does it? We go into groups, acting classes, martial arts dojos, religious groups, political groups, anywhere that people get together and organize together, you can create a cult dynamic. As we've been over. So the law only recognizes it in one context. We want to expand that. I want to see that expanded. You want to see that expanded. And the only way to make that happen is to get with the lawmakers and make them do it. So that's now an effort happening over in the UK. There are laws on the books in the United States, in various states, not from the federal level, about coercive control. They also confine it to a domestic sphere. This is work that needs to be done to expand these laws state by state. It's going to take activists and, people like you and me working to inform the legislators and pressure the legislators to enact these laws and enact them in a wide enough sphere that we can actually use them to prosecute cults. That was what my second essay was about this week, just discussing that matter. So it would be awesome to see that. And the only way that I know to get people behind that is to raise awareness of it. And the only way I know how to do that is to write or make videos and tell people about it. So I hope that that essay contributes in some fashion to that movement. I'm sitting here in a room in Denver, Colorado. I'm not in the UK. I'm not meeting with, members of the British Parliament. I'm not enacting or pushing for, the specific language that should be used in this. I'm not that person. I'm the guy trying to support those people and bring some awareness via my channel to you guys. That's my role right now, and trying to offer what I can to the space to bring something positive to it, like the books that I write, So, all right. So that's what I wanted to say about my writing this week. So, one moment. All right. And like I said, I've got some other essays I'm lining up to get out. I'm hoping maybe, I don't know, I'm not going to put some kind of thing there that I'm going to get one done a week or something, but we'll see. Okay. Yeah. All right. I had one question from Michael Yoder that came in on the email line this week. So I want to throw that up on the screen and answer that to kick us off on our Q&A. Here we go. Michael Yoder asks, in 1968, in a lecture to auditors, LRH talked about mutual engrams and their relation to body thetans, BTs. What is a mutual engram and how does that relate to auditing? All right, Michael. So this is kind of interesting, which is why I thought you all might enjoy it as a first step on the answers here today. It's the origin story of body thetans. Why is it that we have them in the first place? According to L. Ron Hubbard in Scientology's mythology, when Xenu blew up all those volcanoes with atomic weapons and annihilated in a genocidal rage billions and trillions of beings, right? He didn't destroy their thetans because you can't kill a thetan. L. Ron Hubbard says in Scientology that a thetan is immortal and it is not a physical manifestation of any kind. It doesn't exist as an outcome of matter, energy, space, and time. The thetan exists with theta, a word that represents a spiritual energy that is not of this universe. So it transcends this universe. How it is affected by this universe is solely through, Hubbard says, through consideration. It believes it can be shot, or it believes it can be electroshocked, or it believes it can, have electronics like Ghostbusters, proton beams, right? Can affect it, and therefore they can, right? It's all belief. Thetans are trapped, ironically, in a prison of belief. All right. So that's the thetan in this universe. But why do they glom together in clusters and create body thetans? Why would a thetan, who is an independent life unit entity unlike any other, get into this catatonic, comatose state and glom onto a body, glom onto another thetan? Why? Why indeed? Because of a very, very serious engram, and involving high levels of energy that impact the thetan so hard, basically gets hit with an energy hammer, right? Like a nuclear explosion, so hard that it just kind of knocks the thetan out. And the phenomena, Hubbard says, is they will glom together. They will cluster. Do not ask for whom the bell tolls, and do not ask for why this happens, because there's not a lot of explanation. Now, this is all off my memory. I could pull out the bulletins, I guess. But the point is, they glom together. They cluster. Maybe it's some kind of weird mutual protection thing. Maybe it's some energy flow thing. Maybe Hubbard explains it through, tractor beams and pressor beams, just like he does try to explain the puppetry of how a thetan runs a body, right, with energy flows. But however it happens, an engram, a massive engram, like the Xenu incident, right? Just explosion after explosion after explosion. The whole thing is one big engram, one big moment of pain and unconsciousness for the thetan. The body was completely annihilated. And there's the thetan, naked and alone and afraid, right? And overwhelmed with energy, which Xenu, did with all the bombs. And so they cluster together and glom onto another thetan who's not in that catatonic body thetan state. And that's a mutual engram, right? All the thetans who are clustered together share the same engram. That's why it's called a mutual engram. That's it. That's all it is. That's all there is to that. So there you go. Thought you guys might be interested relatively in the, the origin story of body thetans. Okay, so let's get on with the rest of your questions here. See what we got. I'm just going to, like I always do every week, I barely even look at these things before I throw them on the screen. So I hope there's no zingers in here today. But do feel free to ask me anything you want. I'm really trying to address, anything anybody wants to ask me. I've got lots of opinions about things, of course. And so I love answering questions on my expertise, right, on the stuff I really know what I'm talking about. But I'm happy to pontificate about anything. And I will really, really try to keep my ranting to a minimum. All right. Xion asks here, I enjoyed the podcast you did with Jon Atack on some of the fundamentals of thought book material. Yeah, we're having a blast. We've done Jon Atack and I have done 2 episodes so far. The last one just dropped on Saturday, where we're basically going through the original version of the Scientology book, Fundamentals of Thought, from, I think it was 1956 or 57, that Hubbard had this thing written. And I say that because he didn't write it. This other guy did. And boy, is it fun going through the Scientology basics with Jon Atack and just kind of ripping these things apart from, again, a more thoughtful perspective than, what a bunch of junk that is, trying to engage a little bit more seriously with the ideas and show how goofy they are. We took apart the ARC triangle and the 8 dynamics on Saturday, for example. If you watch the podcast, I think you'll enjoy. So I had forgotten the racial passages in it. Yeah, I had too. Hubbard refers to the yellow people and the red people and the white people and the brown people. He uses this color spectrum, and it's just racist as hell, right? I'd forgotten the racial passages. Do you plan to do another in that series with Jon? Oh, yeah, we have definitely got more episodes coming. We get together basically about once a month or so and shoot a show, right? And then put it out. So it'll probably be a few weeks, and we'll get together and just keep going through this stuff. I'm letting Jon kind of lead as far as what we're covering, but it's really just going through Fundamentals of Thought, and then maybe we'll tackle some other Scientology basic texts or works. But it's just fun and games, and a chance to, kind of practice some analysis. It's fun. All right, Joe DeCeppo, are you familiar with replication crisis? Yes, I am. Studies from the 60s about cult control that either can't be repeated for ethical reasons or results aren't replicated. I spoke with an academic about. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Social sciences, in fact, all the sciences suffer to one degree or another from the problem of not being able to be replicated. In other words, if you carry out an experiment under X conditions using X variables, and you properly design your experiment and you properly set things up and describe what you did, it shouldn't be any problem at all for somebody else to come along and replicate what you did and hopefully get the same results you got, or similar enough that it is proven out that what you did is statistically true and relevant, right? You put out a study and you say, look, I did this study, and under these conditions, 20% of the people liked black rather than red, right? We did this thing. We did this experiment where we told people, okay, we did this experiment where we told people before they walked in the room and they didn't realize we were doing this, we told them, boy, red is such a great color. Red is the color of power. There we go. Red's the color of power. And somehow you drop this line to people, or you somehow get this communicated to the test subjects. And then you take them into a room and you do something with them where they have to choose between red and black things. And 20% of them, choose red, or 20% more of them choose red. Then this other group of people that you didn't say that to or put any kind of implication about red there before you had them go in and do this scenario where they were going to choose these two colors, right? And then you assert, well, because we did this, people are clearly capable of being influenced by this statement to choose red more often than they would have otherwise, right? Standard, typical, kind of. I'm not saying that's a great experiment, but I'm saying that that's kind of how an experiment could be designed and executed. And then you publish your results, and there you are, and you're saying, if you say these words or somehow communicate this idea to people before you do this thing with them, you can influence the outcome. You can get more people to choose red than black. Well, that's a very interesting thing to assert, isn't it? Right? It tends to put there this idea that suggestibility is a thing and that you can influence people with words alone to make decisions, which of course you can. But is it that effective that 1 out of 5 will choose, right, based on the influence? Well, somebody else should be able to do exactly what you did and basically come up with the same results. And that would be a duplication of and substantiation of your experiment results. And that's how science is supposed to work, bottom line, right? I think we all understand that, but I wanted to go over the steps of it, right? So we're all super clear about, what the process is that is being replicated. You got to duplicate exactly what those people did. And they have to give you enough information in the write-up of the experiment, in the paper, that you can do that. If they asked questions, you have to have the exact questions they asked. If they set up the experiment in a certain way, you have to be able to set up the experiment that same way without big, wide, new variables being entered into the equation. And that statement I just said right there is the trick. That's the gotcha. Because the human mind and the human brain, right, the human experience is chock-a-block with so many variables that you got to make sure when you're doing your controls and when you're designing your experiment that you are factoring out, that you are basically nullifying the effects of as many of those variables you're not controlling, right? You gotta somehow make it so your experiment doesn't get messed up or influenced by variables you're not seeing. And let me tell you a couple of the variables that have been found over the years that create a replication problem. Language, cultural background, education level, gender, right? Time, period, cultural factors. There's a lot of things that influence how we think and what makes us do what we do. So if you're going to design an experiment, you have to take those things into account. And you will find over and over and over again in a very, very interesting way that the experiment you do in Northeast England at a college or university with university students will give you X results. Yet when you run that same experiment over in Sweden on a different demographic of 35 to 50 or something, you get different results. Were you wrong? Maybe. Or maybe you were just right in your results of your experiment on the university students. Maybe you were right for that group of people, that group that you experimented on, but that doesn't necessarily apply universally. This, I think, what I'm describing here is, I think, one of the biggest ways that we see the replication crisis play out is different people with different backgrounds, language, etc., right, can act or react differently. And it's very interesting to me, if I've read and understand everything properly, and I believe I have, it's very interesting that one of the few social science experiments that has been successfully replicated cross cultures and times has been what is called the Asch conformity experiment. And this is the one where everybody's in on the gag, everybody's in on the experiment except the one dude in the room who is being experimented on. And what happens is they are presented like on the classic experiment is there's a blackboard or a whiteboard with three, with two lines drawn on it, one of them obviously larger than the other one, longer than the other one. It's just, you can just see it, right? It's very clear. And the people in the room all agree that the shorter line is the longer line. And the dude who's being experimented on, is he going to agree with those people or not? Is he going to go, no, the longer line is longer, obviously. What the hell's wrong with you people, right? Or is he going to go along with it? Well, it turns out 3 out of 4 people around the world, multiple ways of setting this up, multiple ways of running this test, different variables you can throw in, right? Give a lab coat to one of the people, do this, do that. You can mess with the results, but pretty uniformly and very counterintuitively, right? 3 out of 4 people are going to go with the lie, are going to go along with the group in its false assertion that the longer line is shorter, right? Fucking fascinating stuff. Really fascinating. That one has been replicated over and over and over again. But some experiments, in fact, many of them, get published. Looks like valid, legit science. But when you replicate it somewhere else, you don't get those results. Don't even get remotely those results. It's not even close. And then the question becomes, did they fake it? Or did they validly get those results, but it's only in that group, right? And this is where replication itself can become interesting, because if you're not replicating the experiment on the same kind of people that it was run on in the first place, are you really replicating it? You can get into a lot of very interesting questions with this. A lot of it comes down to the assertions that are made or the conclusions that are made by people. At least my critique of this. I'm not like some academic scientist guy who's running around doing a lot of social study experiments, right? But my understanding of this is people can draw broader conclusions from they could do a perfectly valid experiment, but then overgeneralize the results, right? Because it turns out when you experiment on university students in Northeast England or Northeast United States, right, at the big colleges there, big universities, that's not representative of how everybody in the world is. Surprise, right? So you better be careful as to what kind of conclusions you draw or make from your experiment results. And this is where the disconnect happens, I believe, between an awful lot of valid science that gets done and how it's communicated to the public or how it's communicated even to other scientists. Because the conclusions can be wackadoodle, even if the methodology was sound or relatively sound, right? You can make a mistake. You can do everything great all the way to the end and then screw it all up with some bullshit conclusion. And you see this in headlines from editors who are not scientists, trying to make some study that was done sound sexier or sound more salacious or sound more interesting than it really was. The scientists weren't the ones making the inflated hyperbolic claims. The editors and science writers and tech journals did, right? That happens all the time. So there's a lot of reasons, a lot of levels that this works at, where if one of these levels gets it wrong or screws it up or miscommunicates about it, then it can really screw things up too. And it can make it look like there's a replication problem when there isn't, which is itself interesting, right? So I'm just kind of throwing all of this out there really just as food for thought for you, just as something to think about, because it's not a simple Simon thing of all scientists are just lying these days. And that's a conclusion an awful lot of people go to when they hear about replication problems, right? Oh, well, they lied. Why would you say that? Why would you think that that's the immediate place to go? That's an unwarranted assumption to make about people who go through an awful lot of work to put an experiment together and get the money together and get it funded and get it executed and then get it published. It's a tremendous amount of work. It's way more work than I ever want to do. I don't want to go do all that. It's bureaucracy. Oh my God. It's just so much work just to get social science done in the first place. So why assume that they're just lying? You know what I mean? Like, that's the go-to place people go. And I'm not saying you're doing this, Joe. Not at all in your question. I'm not at all implying that. I'm just commenting on the phenomena because I see it over and over and over again on social media, right? I've been watching this for years. So this is a problem. And of course, now having said all that, of course, there are scientists who lie. There are, Andrew Wakefield. There are, you motherfucker. Yeah, there are scientists who absolutely lie through their fucking teeth for money, influence, fame, right? Recognition. Yes, they do. And that is a problem too. But I think if you look into it in any kind of real deep, serious way, you're going to see systemic problems in the world of science, in the world of social sciences especially. Hard sciences are bad enough. The bureaucracy and nonsense, the hoop jumping and politics and, the stepping all over each other and all the human crap that happens in any group, it absolutely happens in science. And the hard sciences are no exception. The soft sciences, the social sciences, right? A lot more room, a lot more wiggle room in that field for goofy, nonsensical thinking and goofy, nonsensical fads and goofy, nonsensical results, right? That absolutely is there. But I just caution against taking one or two or even three examples of bad behavior or bad actors or, people who fudge their results and over applying that to the entire thing, because most social scientists are very serious people they're trying their hardest to do serious work. Sometimes they're just not up to it. There's that too, by the way, as far as like what happens and how bad results happen in experiments. It's because they're badly designed, because they're poorly thought through, because they didn't realize in the middle of the experiment that this other thing was going to happen and then change the experiment to go with it because it needed to be changed, right? Dump the experiment, try again, try something new. No, we can't. We've already gone this far. We sunk cost fallacy, right? All the things that make things go wrong. All that happens in social sciences. So, okay. Anyway, enough said about all that. But, yeah. Okay. Oh man, I see your comment here, Love Food Kitchen, on this MP. Yeah, politics sucks, doesn't it? Doesn't politics just suck sometimes that way? Oh man. All right. Okay. XJW Vernon, since Hubbard was biased toward black people, what did he think about a white Scientologist marrying a black Scientologist? Oh, that's an interesting question. That's a hard question for me to answer. I mean, the context would matter, of course, right? If it was a very rich black man who was given a lot of money to Scientology and L. Ron Hubbard's coffers, then I'm sure Hubbard would approve, right? But, I don't know. I don't think Hubbard was so openly and blatantly racist against black people. Yeah, but I don't know, man. I don't know. I don't want to give him the benefit of the doubt, actually, as I sit here right now. Hubbard was pretty fucked up on this stuff. Um, my problem, here's what I'll say about this, right? Here's where I'll comment on this, because I think it's important to say. Racism, not all racism is racism, right? There is nuances and shades of difference and spectrum thinking possible here, right? Some people are more racist than others. Some people are therefore less racist than others. There's degrees, right? I think we can agree on that. I don't think it has to be thought of as a black and white thing. So, so, So how racist was Hubbard, right? When I think about Hubbard's writings in South Africa, where the racism really comes out, um, like actually derogatory statements directed solely towards black people. They're thieves, they're criminals, you can't leave anything laying around when they're about, right? These kind of implications of how South Africans lie as easily as they breathe. They have no relationship with the truth. You know, these kind of implications were made by his writings and his lecturing. Pretty racist stuff. But a lot of that was also driven by opportunism, and so I wonder how much of that he was saying as a dog whistle to powerful white South Africans who he was trying to get in good with. Obviously, calling out racist dog whistles is racist. It shouldn't be done. But if you ask me now, well, what did Hubbard really think about this? It's a little hard to tell because there is an element of opportunism in what he was saying and doing. And after he left South Africa, you don't hear Hubbard going on about black people again. There's no post-South Africa lectures or writings Hubbard has about black people or about Asian people or about, women versus men, really. In other words, it's not a real serious cause for him. It's not something he was really deeply invested in. Not, for example, when you compare his hatred of race or his racism with his hatred of psychiatry, which he never let up on. For decades, he was one-note wonder about psychiatry. It's awful. It's horrible. It's evil. It must be destroyed. It must be done away with. We must salt the earth where psychiatric hospitals stand. We must destroy this entire institution of psychiatry. I mean, if he was psychiatrist, you know what I mean? Like the guy really had a hard-on for getting rid of psychiatry. And he was very consistent about that. Actually, there's only one or two places where he kind of says, yeah, we don't really have to be this way. We could stop this war with psychiatry if we wanted. He did say that once. But most of the time, he was very consistent about that. When it comes to black people, not entirely as consistent. He's got writings reaching out a helping hand. Black Americans are people, the black people are people we should be helping. We should be working, Scientology should be working with these folks. So not quite as hard of a take Hubbard had, right, towards racism as he did towards psychiatry. And those are the things I think about. I go, okay, well, here's something Hubbard really, really seemed to hate, really had a thing about, right, psychiatry. And here's the thing where he's dropping dog whistles and he's dropping these words and he's saying things that are pretty gross. But he's only doing it because he's trying to get in with these people. And I say he's only doing that. I don't know if he's only doing it because of opportunism or if he really had some racist shit going on in his head. But given how he talked about the, Mongolians and Chinese people when he was over in those areas as a child, in his diaries where he, says that, these are not good people, basically, we know that the racism is real. We know he is a racist. We just don't know to what degree, right? Not really. I don't think if we're being honest, we know just how deep that goes for him. And that's why a question like this, I go, well, damn, I could see situations where Hubbard would be perfectly okay with a interracial marriage. And I can see where he wouldn't be okay with it. He'd be like, no, right? I know I'm a horrible person for not being able to give a clear answer on that. And I feel like I should be able to give a clearer answer on that, but I'm trying to be honest about it. And yes, there are Black Scientology executives, Black Scientology VIPs, Black Scientology celebrities. And there have been for years, decades. I mean, you can go back. Michael Roberts is an actor who's been in Scientology since the 70s. And he's a working actor. He's not A-list, but the guy's been working all this time. And yes, there were Black people in Scientology that I said, yes, sir, no, sir, how high, sir? Right? They hold positions of rank and status in Scientology. There is nothing anywhere in the writings of the Sea Org that would indicate that somebody who is Black or Chinese or Asian or Japanese or Korean or Indian would have any problem at all rising up the ranks. There's nothing in there about that. And I think if Hubbard was a real racist who really had a thing about people's skin color, then he would have not been shy about writing about it in the Scientology rules and regulations. But he never, ever puts anything like that down. So how seriously am I supposed to take his racism? Well, I do take it seriously to the degree that he was incredibly derisive of Asians and he was incredibly derisive of Black South Africans. So I take those words for what they are, right? Racist bullshit. But I contextualize it with, opportunism. So anyway, maybe that's not a great answer. I'm really not sure, but that's what I got for you today on that. All right. X-Scion, I also enjoy your podcast with Alex about Scientology org structure. Thank you. I do. I love doing those. Why are so much of its organizational policies so wacky? Because Hubbard was a whack. Really, because it's an evolved organizational structure which couldn't figure out how to organize itself for the first 20 years of its existence. Hubbard kept playing around with the organizational structure. It was a franchise system, then it was the org system. Now we're going to run everything through St. Hill from a central command base, and we're going to use this telex system, and I'm going to run these guys and tell them what to do, and we're going to use statistics because Hubbard got all hot to trot on stats, and we're going to do that now, and then we're going to do conditions, and I'm going to do this organizing board, and I'm going to draw from a galactic civilization from 70 million years ago. I mean, dude, right? This is just all over the place. He went through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different organizational structures that I can think of off the top of my head from 1950s through to the 1970s, 80s, 90s, right? 80s into the 1980s. We have 8 wholly different systems happening, right? Org board, pre-org board, then org board, then variations on the org board, then morphing out with the aid system and flag bureaus, and then we're going to throw networks into this, and it's going to be the flag representative and the LRH communicator, and then we're going to throw an FBO into this, and each one of these is tacking a new thing on to this system. I just thought it's an awful lot like how Hubbard described how our Slickus got built in space. He has this whole stupid ass story about this whole track civilization that built itself so big out in space. It just kept building these structures that just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger, that Hubbard said it imploded on itself, if I remember right. You know, it just kind of black holed itself or something, right? And that's a really great, stupid, but great analogy for how Hubbard built the organization of Scientology. And he used tons and tons and tons of suggestions and ideas from other people that he just threw into the mix. If you go and listen to the FEBC lectures, there's the FEBC lectures, the Prod.org system lectures, and then there's the Esto system lectures. It's 2 sets of these lectures. And you listen to these things, you are going to be you're just going to be so lost as to what the hell he's talking about. I mean, lost, just like this doesn't make sense. You know, and then you get another 10 years of his aides and juniors and Sea Org people desperately trying to make it make sense, and then coming up with this whole new system. And then, of course, in the 1980s, we get the labyrinth of corporations and the real structure of Scientology, right? Where it's not any of that anyway. Scientology isn't really organized around the systems that it says it's organized around. That's the real joke of Scientology. That's really the place where this goes, is at the end, you go through all these policies, you go through all this work, and you realize none of this is actually what they're doing. And that's where things get just complete. You just realize it's a free-for-all in that group. And that's actually why it doesn't go anywhere. It's not because these systems are so fucked up you can't work your way through them, because it would be better to have some system than no system. But the fact of the matter is, Scientology doesn't really even run on its own organizing system. And that's kind of the big joke of the whole thing, is I've got my papers, I got my notes right here, actually, from what we're doing. And we have 2 more episodes of stuff to do. And this stuff, like, for example, evaluations, the data series, there's a whole set of policies in Scientology about how to think. It's a series of policies on logic and reason and coming up with logical conclusions and doing investigations and how to conduct them and what to look for and where you can find the problem areas and where you can find the areas that are doing really, really well, and break those apart and see why, if something is doing really well, why is it doing really well? And if something's really fucking up, why is it really fucking up and who's fucking it up, right? Like, that whole system is called evaluation. Data series evaluation. And you're supposed to be trained. It's a very, very serious thing in Scientology. To do this whole series of policies, you have to read them all in order. You can't just piecemeal it. You can't study the data series out of sequence. I don't know if you knew that or not. So you read all these policies on how to think according to L. Ron Hubbard, and how to do an analysis and how to do an evaluation. And guess what? No one is doing evaluations in Scientology right now, and they haven't been doing evaluations in over 20 years. Not a one. The only person in Scientology who gets to do evaluations is David Miscavige, and his evaluations are laughably bad, right? All of the golden ages, from the golden age of tech, golden age of ethics, golden age of OT, golden age of admin, golden age of knowledge, golden age of the next generation, golden age of tech phase 2. Every one of these things is based on David Miscavige's evaluations, right? I don't know about the next generation one, actually. The kid stuff might not be an eval, but everything else was. And David Miscavige can't evaluate his way out of a wet paper bag, right? The guy just can't fucking think. So it's hilarious to watch him try. because he just keeps screwing it up again and again and again. But he's the only one in Scientology management who's actually doing evaluations. Nobody else even uses this stuff. They're not allowed to. There was a core of people called the eval core. Their job was to sit in a room and evaluate orgs all day, right? From this ivory tower position. Their job was to pull in statistics and information from the individual orgs and do evals on those orgs. And then they would get a tailor-made program for that org, not for every org, for that org. What is it that Keokuk needs to do this week? What is it that New York needs to do to boost itself up to the next level, to get itself out of the doldrums, to get itself, going again? Here's your evaluation, New York org. Do this, right? That is what an eval and what eval core was all about. They don't exist. Miscavige wiped out the eval core 30 years ago. About 25 years ago, right around 1995, 96, eval core ceased to be a thing. That's one example, right, of a massive structure inside Scientology, the eval system. We're going to talk about it. I think we're going to talk about it next week, or in the next show we do, which is not going to be next Wednesday after. When Alex and I get together again, we're going to talk about this stuff. But none of it's done. They don't even use it in Scientology. So you go, yeah, these policies and this structure are really, really goofy. But that's not really the elephant in the room, is it? It's funny. I think it's funny. I think it's hilarious, personally. Because it's not like this system really works that great. But if they did this, it would work better than what they're doing now. I think that's just such a joke. Okay. What are we talking about here? Oh, that's interesting. Okay. Make sure if you're going to ask me questions, Cassie, that you put them in the question box for me so I can throw them up on the screen and answer them. That's the only thing I have about doing my show is welcome to the show. I don't know if you've been here before, but put your questions in the question box and I'll throw them up on the screen and answer them. Excuse me. All right. Okay. Do you think Aaron has learned his lesson with how to protest? He gets out tomorrow. No, he hasn't learned anything. Okay, XJW Vernon, do British Scientologists know how offensive the WOG word is to non-whites in British society? Do they use the word outside of the org? Okay, so there are people who are going to chastise me just for reading that question out loud. I'm sorry, but it's a word, and it gets used in Scientology, and it's a racial epithet, and it sucks. But it's there, and I have to identify the word, or people don't know what I'm talking about. Nobody's going to understand me if I sit here and say the W word. They just aren't going to get it. So that's why I don't do that, right? But I know that is so offensive to some people, and I get it, but I don't mean to offend you when I use that word, okay? It's a word that is used in Scientology all the time, and it basically means a muggle. It's the same concept. It's somebody who doesn't have the magic. They don't have Scientology. They don't know about it. They're outside of the Scientology world. And that is what that word represents in Scientology, and they use it all the time. Because most Scientologists have absolutely no idea that it is a racial epithet. I had no clue whatsoever in 27 years of working for Scientology that word had any meaning outside the church, because I'd never heard it, seen it, had anything to do with it. So I just didn't know, right? And most Scientologists don't. But yeah, they definitely do use it. Now, do British Scientologists know? I couldn't say. I don't know the British Scientology experience to that degree. This is where my cultural divide with Britain is really apparent, right? Because I didn't grow up in the UK. I don't know the language over there. And there are some key differences. And culturally, I don't know how much that word infuses their culture. I know it's not as much as the N word has infused the American culture, or I would have heard about it way earlier. The N word is all over American culture. You cannot grow up in America at all without hearing about it very early on, right? It's unavoidable. The W word, I have no idea, right? You'll have to ask somebody like Alex about that, actually. I'll try to remember to ask him about that, actually. Put that on my question here. All right. Okay. When you wrote your post, did you know there are Roblox games dedicated to these Scientology speedruns? They've reconstructed orgs and coded games. It really adds to the LARP stuff. I did not know that they had actually built real games based on the speedruns, but that doesn't surprise me at all. And in fact, just reinforces my thesis, doesn't it? Right? I'm right about this. That is what is going on. Now, and again, it could switch over. It could morph into something more serious and more real, more substantial, right? But because I keep seeing every day, this is an activity that more and more people are glomming onto or doing in other parts of the world. That's interesting to me because is this Pokemon Go, with Scientology, or is this Anonymous 2.0? Only time's going to tell, right? I don't see, just to comment on this real fast, and I didn't say this earlier, I don't see any organized structure falling into place to organize this as Anonymous 2.0. And without that structure and organization, it's not going to happen. Anonymous was not, it didn't just organically, naturally, nobody had to say or do anything to make what happened happen, right? There was massive amounts of organization that occurred behind the scenes to make it happen. I don't see any of these TikTokers doing anything remotely like that work to bring this, to coalesce this together into something substantial. So it looks like it's just this sort of organizing around gamemanship. And that's a way to organize a group of people, but let's not pretend it's activism, because it's not, right? It's a very different thing. And again, I'm not saying this to put anybody down. That ain't my flow here. I'm not like, you kids, get off my lawn, stop getting in my space, stop doing. That's not where I'm coming from on this. I don't support it because it's dangerous to the kids who are doing it. And I don't want to see them get hurt. And I definitely don't want to see them end up in jail or prison for committing felonies. And that's what I see on video right now, is literal felonies being committed. And I'm like, man, you guys really need to think about what you're doing. And of course, they're playing a game, so they're not thinking about it. That's my concern about all of this, right? I just don't want to see people get hurt. All right. Yeah, they probably are the most amount of people in Scientology orgs in the last 20 years, TM. All right, have you heard of Dr. Jill Bolt Taylor? She says that her near-death stroke taught her about consciousness, ego, and identity. Damage to the left of her brain made her unable to speak or remember. All right, just to make sure, let me check something here real fast. See if this is the person I'm thinking of, or is it TED Talk, huh? I might have watched it at some point. Neuroanatomist, author, public speaker. studied severe mental illnesses because of her brother's psychosis in the early 1990s. She was a postdoctoral fellow at Harvard Medical School, where she was involved in mapping the brain. Good. To determine how cells communicate with each other. Well, she knows something about that. She had a massive stroke in 1996, and her personal experience and subsequent 8-year recovery influenced her work. And she did a TED Talk and wrote a bestseller. Okay. 2008 Time 100 list of the most 100 influential people. My Stroke of Insight. Okay, good. What does she say here? Thank you for your patience as I figure out who this woman is and what this is about. She was on Oprah. She did a TED Talk in February 2008. She wrote a book about the insights and workings of the brain. You are responsible for the energy that you bring and encourage the students to assume the same responsibility in their future lives. Okay, they made a ballet about it? Okay, that's interesting. Doesn't really say what the insights were. The duality between rationality and instinctive sensual response, control and the lack of it, between balance and instability, solitude and society. Just reading all this off the Wikipedia page here. Oh yeah, she had a golf ball sized clot. God damn. Well, that's all very interesting. Obviously, I have not heard of her in any real significant way, so I can't comment on her conclusions or writings because I don't really know what she had to say, other than running through her Wikipedia page there. Sorry, don't really have anything intelligent to add or say to that because I don't know anything about what her assertions are from what it was she learned from that. Are independents welcome with protesting? Has there been a notable history of independents and non-independents collaborating in Church of Scientology protests? I believe that anyone is welcome to protest Scientology. I'm not aware of any biases or problems or issues with independent Scientologists going and protesting Scientology. I've seen them do it. Going literally physically in front of churches of Scientology and carrying placards and signs and, organizing themselves to protest Scientology. I've seen that happen. I've seen that happen in person, back when I was in the Sea Org. So, yeah. I don't know that there's any notable history of this. I don't remember seeing or hearing of clashes between independents and non-independents at protest sites or anything. I've never seen or heard of anything like that. As far as I know, everybody would be, if you're out there protesting Scientology, I'd be pretty sure you'd welcome any company you had, because outside of the 2008 anonymous protests, Scientology protests have not really been very notable for their size. They're not really big protests. So more the merrier, right? Okay, Old Skull Sokol. I cannot read that name. I do not know what that is. How do they turn missions into Class 5 orgs? Doesn't the starter package for a mission holder cost $30,000? Last time I checked, it did. That's a lot of money going into waste. I'm asking because of the situation in Helsinki. Okay. Not familiar with the situation in Helsinki, so maybe you'll have to let me know about that. How the mission starter packages work, Helsinki or not, I can tell you this. It's a franchise system. And missions were originally referred to as franchises. And I mean, just like McDonald's. So you have a central authority, which is the Church of Scientology International, and you have RTC, which is ultimately the Religious Technology Center. That organization holds the trademarks and service marks. It owns them for all of the symbols and methods and techniques and stuff in Dianetics and Scientology. And you sign a license agreement as a new mission holder. You pay for this license agreement. that they will give you authorization to use those trademarks and service marks in a limited way. You can't use all of them. For example, you cannot, as a mission, deliver the OT levels. You can only deliver auditing up to the level of clear and certain courses that you can deliver. You can't deliver auditor training, for example. So a mission is granted the right to deliver certain services, and the mission holder is the guy who's going to be the pioneer. He's the one who's going to open up new territory, and that's the sort of pioneer spirit of opening a mission. It's you as a mission holder going, you know what? I believe in Scientology so much, and I think I can make a go of it, that I want to open up Montana. There's no Scientology in Montana right now that I'm aware of. I'm going to go open up a mission. So you pay the $30,000 to the Church of Scientology International. You sign the papers. You get a shitload of books and electronic equipment so you can show the films of Scientology, some of the films, introductory films, videos, stuff like that. You get this whole video wall thing that you can put in your mission to show people and introduce people to Dianetics and Scientology with videos. And you're told, go make a go of it, right? Off you go. And then they give you weekly guidance as to how to grow your mission, right? But you're the one who has to go rent the building, hire the staff, see that the staff get paid, and they are not required to pay minimum wage. It's a whole religious volunteer thing. So country by country, the local regulations might be different. But certainly here in America, if you're a religious worker as a volunteer and you sign a legally binding contract saying that you are a religious volunteer, then they don't owe you shit, right? You just signed away your rights to labor board disputes, and you're not holding down a job. You're a religious volunteer. Big difference. So that's what it is to run a mission, right? Mission holder does all that. It's obviously not a very popular thing for people to be doing these days. There are not very many Scientology missions, and they close just as fast or faster than they open. Yeah. All right, TM, after leaving Scientology, was there any media, TV shows, movies, games, etc., that you wanted to consume, binge immediately now that you were free? Oh, hell yes. Yes, there was. Oh, yeah. Hey, cool. To expect me to remember your question from 2 months ago is unrealistic. I'm sorry, but I'm sure you did tell me all about it, but I'm just telling you, I ain't the guy who's going to remember questions from 2 months ago. So I'm sorry if I dropped the ball on that. I really am, but I'm not that guy. All right. So the things that come to mind on answering this question are that I really wanted to consume South Park right away. I binged like 12 or 13 seasons of South Park in a matter of a few weeks. It was, I feel like I mainlined South Park for a while. It was like, I was so overwhelmed by it. But it was fun. It was interesting. I had a lot of fun doing that, right? It was a real, it was interesting. It just blew my mind over and over and over and over again. South Park did. Some of the episodes were crap, but some of them were so insightful and gave me these points of view that I had never considered before about, everything from sex education to LGBT rights to transgenderism to social inequity to just the stupidity of people in groups, especially. South Park was so insightful to me. It was one of the most amazing educations in critical thinking at a time when I was really keen to be educated in critical thinking. And so I was able to, I sort of used it for that. Because somebody said South Park is one of the, I read that somewhere early on. South Park's one of the most critical thinking shows out there. And I agree. I really do. You might not always agree with Trey and Matt or the writers as to their take on stuff, that's for sure. But you can't say they haven't thought about what they're writing pretty deeply, right? It's interesting stuff. So that's cool. A lot of movies, and a shitload of movies. I mean, I hadn't seen Batman Begins. I'd seen The Dark Knight when I was in the Sea Org. I think it was when I graduated the RPF. Actually, I went and saw The Dark Knight in the theaters somehow. Maybe it was on repeat or something, or to just come out or something. But I had never seen Batman Begins, right? So I went and watched that, and just a ton of other stuff. I remember horror movies I caught up on, all kinds of genre stuff, sci-fi stuff that I hadn't seen. A lot of catching up culturally. I had to catch up to a ton of music from the 90s and 2000s that I had not had any exposure to at all, because I'd just been, living in a basement basically in the Sea Org for a lot of years. So a lot of 90s music and 2000s music was just never in my headspace, right? Never was exposed to it. Let's see. Finally went back and figured out stuff that I'd lived through, but I'd been so confused as a Scientologist, because I was on staff in Santa Barbara from 1987 forward. I was working for Scientology from 1987 through to 2012. So all that time I was kind of in a limited headspace of what's going on in the outside world, because I was very much invested in the Scientology world. So going back and I guess you could say recalibrating my head around stuff like 90s conservatism, Rush Limbaugh, the whole Bill Clinton thing, like his entire presidency, right? 9/11, all these, the dot-com bubble, the housing crisis. I mean, none of that stuff really made any sense to me when I was in Scientology. I couldn't wrap my head around most of that. So I didn't really even totally get what was going on in the world while it was happening, because I was in this bubble world. Obviously, we knew 9/11 happened, but that brought everybody out of the damn hole. But that was a short-lived thing. 9/11 came and went, as far as I was concerned, in the Sea Org, right? Because we were on a mission that was not what the rest of the world was doing. And I think that I think in retrospect that there's a plus and a minus to all of that, right? Because I caught up on a bunch of stuff, bunches and bunches of stuff. But I also had this outside perspective of never having been in it. And so I didn't have the same cultural history that maybe a lot of you had. And so I think in a way, my perspective on some of those events or times is a little more fresh or objective in a way. But that's really me. I don't mean to be any kind of like whatever. I just mean when you don't live through it, you don't have certain prejudices or certain biases or certain ways of thinking about stuff, right? Because I didn't. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how else to put it. I think you kind of get what I'm saying. It's not a better than, worse than thing. It's just a different thing, that's all. But yeah. Okay, TM, are you aware of any up and coming cults that are growing or spreading? I'm not going to beat a dead horse here, but I've been talking about Christian nationalism for a long time on this channel, and I really don't think people get it, or how corrosive or destructive or widespread that problem is in this country. I really, really, really think most people think that Christian nationalism is some radical lunatic fringe in America, and it ain't. It's a powerful driving force behind a lot of what is happening right now. And we've talked about it and talked about it and talked about it on this channel. I've been talking about it for years, and it falls on deaf ears. It just does. Y'all, I don't know. It's very, very real, and it is a growing thing. And if you're in a bubble world where you think that the left is on the verge of taking things back over, and we're right on the edge, and Trump is right on the edge of getting kicked out, and everything's going back to normal, we're not, and it's not. It's never going back to how it was. And the Christian nationalists are a driving force as to why it is that way. And it's a cult. It's a collection of cults, actually. It's a sort of an umbrella movement of a number of cults, just like white supremacy is a collection of disparate groups who all want, whitey on top. But how they see that, or how that's supposed to manifest, is slightly different from one group to the next, but it's common cause. And they're all, on board that crazy train. Christian nationalism is very similar, right? There's a lot of different flavors of it, but it very, very easily has fallen under the umbrella of MAGA. And it has gained an incredible amount of political power through the whole Project 2025 Heritage Foundation thing. And people treat it like a joke. They think it's a joke. They really think it's not a big deal. And I don't have any more words to say you're wrong. It's not a small problem. It's a huge problem. And it ain't going away. And after Trump's gone, it's not going away. So that's what I got for you on that. As far as mescalism goes, absolutely. Yes, mescalism is certainly on the rise. But yeah, y'all really need to tune in on the Christian nationalist stuff, because it's not a fucking joke. It's not. The people in charge right now, some of them are fanatical about it. And I mean to the level of the Sea Org kind of fanatical. Like, they'll do anything. Anything. Concentration camps are not a problem for these people. Right? When you're in a mindset of not only is the apocalypse coming, not only is Armageddon real, but I'm going to help push it along and bring it into being. This is doomsday stuff. And I'm not trying to fearmonger. I'm just trying to be realistic about some of the social forces at play right now, right? And cults are a big one. I think we're going to see, because of the amount of social unrest, division, economic tumultuousness, gas prices have only just begun, by the way. All that stuff, right? I mean, it's easy to be a doomer, so I'm not trying to be a doomer. I'm just trying to give you guys a heads up, right? I'm really trying to keep a more optimistic, believe it or not, I'm trying to keep an optimistic, sort of rational optimism in place in my mind, and not just be Mr. Doomer. But I believe that with the coming unrest, there will be a rise in religious cults. Right? People will gravitate towards that in their desperation, anxiety, and fear of what to do or how to deal with things. Right? It's a classic refuge for people of all stripes, across all times, all cultures. Right? Religion and religious cults and ideological cults are a classic refuge for people, for all the reasons that we've talked about for years, right? Because it fulfills emotional needs, it provides moral certainty in a morally uncertain world. It provides truths or stable positions of thinking, pillars of thinking for people who don't know what to think or don't know how to navigate a post-truth world. Which is the world that we now live in. You cannot rely on media reports or or politicians or leaders or civic leaders the way you used to be able to tell you the truth. Now they just spin whatever tale they want, and it doesn't even have to make any sense because truth isn't really a thing anymore. Truth is optional, right? Truth doesn't really exist. Nobody really knows what the truth is. This is what a post-truth world is, and that's the one we're living in. So cults thrive in this environment because cults are kind of post-truth, aren't they? Right? If you kind of think about how that works. So when the whole world is that way, it gets a little culty, you know? So we're going to see more of that kind of thing just because people are trying to find answers and solutions, and they're going to look in the wrong places. They're going to look to places or people who are going to dominate them, control them, try to rip them off, or use them for labor, sex, influence, power, whatever, right? All the classic stuff. So you're going to see more of a general rise of these groups, even if I can't sit here and name specifically which ones. Like, for example, the Moonies are disestablishing right now. So I don't see any comeback for the Unification Church. They're in the breakup phase now, right? But could something else be coming up on the rise? Absolutely, right? And it's hard to tell what's going to grab hold and what won't. In the same way, it's hard to tell whether these TikTok speedruns are ever going to morph into something substantial or just fade out. The kids are going to lose interest, the game's going to get over, and they're going to move on, right? Right now, it's all hyper-focus on this because it's so interesting, and Scientology is such an easy target. And so many people agree that Scientology is so toxic that they deserve whatever is coming their way. And this is a very inhumane approach to dealing with cults. But what else do you expect, right? In this environment these days, truth doesn't exist, doesn't matter, and therefore people don't matter. You know, I mean, I don't want to, get too like whatever, but that's kind of how this stuff, that's how I see it playing out. It's not a humane movement, right? The TikTokers couldn't give a shit about Scientologists and, in fact, laugh at their pain. They laugh at them. It's such an inverted dynamic, I guess you could say, from what activism is supposed to be about, that it's not funny to me. And I see endless numbers of people laughing at Scientologists and Scientology's misery with this. And I can't agree with that, because I don't think people's pain and suffering in a cult is funny. And so that's me going on a wild tangent from that, but there we go. Xen, if Trump leads a cult of personality, what happens to the cult when he's gone? Well, they'll either dissipate or follow a new leader. Will they follow a new leader just as strongly, or be a different cult or something else entirely? It's kind of like what was that? QAnon. QAnon, right? Where's QAnon now? To the wind. Busted up. That's what'll happen with Trump's cult, right? Once the guy's gone, they'll either gravitate to somebody else, and there are a number of people who are desperate to fill Trump's shoes, but they won't, because Trump is kind of a unique creature as far as his cult of personality goes. We'll see. We'll have to see what happens. J.D. Vance isn't going to be his replacement, I'll tell you that. Yeah, it'll probably, what we understand as MAGA is breaking up. It's already broken, pretty gone, right? It's already pretty broken up. Trump's cult of personality will always exist in some size, just like Keith Raniere still has followers, right? Just like Lyndon LaRouche still has followers, just like what's that guy, Warren Jeffs, right? Still has followers. You can't judge it based on, well, if they still have followers. It's like, yeah, it's going to get a lot smaller though, right? There will be people who will absolutely Remember the good old days when Trump was around, you know. But but after the leader is gone, right, it breaks up, and that energy goes in different directions, right? Sometimes it gravitates to new leadership, or it disperses out and goes off and finds something else. Or what's going to happen to a lot of people, let me just say this, what's going to happen to, I think, the majority of people who are part of Trump's cult of personality are going to become disaffected. They're just gonna disconnect and disenfranchise themselves politically from the entire thing, right? Just screw it. Trump's gone. Nobody else is gonna meet the challenge or fill his shoes, or the system's horribly broken and Trump's gone and nobody else could fix it, and so there's no reason for me to even be connected with this anymore. And it's not like they're going to flip over to the left or something in their disaffection. They're just going to fade out from being politically minded or politically active at all, which is not a good thing. That is the road we're on that leads to authoritarian overreach and authoritarians getting more and more and more power, is when people disconnect from the process. The authoritarians can move in. That's how it works, right? I mean, just at least that's my interpretation of the history books I read. Okay, Xian, what are some common misconceptions of Scientology held by society today? What I see online are some of the more hyperbolic claims that I'll go ahead and cite today or push back on. That there are children locked up in basements as sex slaves, that there's some kind of pedo ring inside Scientology, that it is a sex trafficking organization. There's an incredible amount of incredibly weird and very salacious nonsense that's being talked about online about Scientology. None of that is true, at least not according to the 27 years of my experience inside that group. And I was pretty involved. There are, there's this mythology that seems to have been built up around the tunnels under PAC. The PAC base used to be a hospital, and there is a connecting tunnel under L. Ron Hubbard Way that connects the basement structures of those buildings, because it's all one complex. And there have been assertions that there are children down there, and there's some kind of pedo ring down there, and there's all kinds of crazy stuff down there. There's not. There's a bunch of pipes down there, and old engineering sump rooms and pump rooms and stuff like that. I have literally cleaned or been through every single square inch of the PAC base. And so when I started seeing this stuff go online, I was like, motherfucker, So yeah, none of that's happening. Scientology is bad enough as it is. We don't have to invent bullshit to make it worse. So a lot of that's nonsensical stuff. Let's see. I keep hearing about the RPF, even though the RPF has been canceled. There is no RPF in Scientology right now. I've heard that over and over and over. I've verified that about 5 or 6 different ways. I was one of the first people, if not the first, to tell everybody, hey, look, there's no more RPF. Because I heard about it way back before anybody else did, and I was talking about that, but nobody believed me. But it's true. There's no RPF, right? So that's a thing that I keep being asked about. Somebody emailed me just the other day. Is this guy an RPFer who was, guarding a door of the test center? And I'm like, I don't think y'all get what the RPF is if you think an RPFer is going to be guarding a door. It doesn't. That's not what the RPF does, right? They would never do that. So it's such a basic misunderstanding that I'm like, you guys will believe anything, right? It's not like that. And so that's why I've spent years trying to explain all the nuance of this and the details of it. But, you know, it's just, this is the frustrating part about doing this work is you do all these explanations and all this work, and then it's like, oh, hey, Chris, is this an RPFer guarding the door of the test center? And you're like, do you not listen to anything I've ever said? I've done whole shows about the RPF, you know? And it just feels like, sorry if I'm a little frustrated about that. Like I said, I'm a little ranty today. All right, RAI, is it true that Hubbard stole tons of ideas about the tech from OG SHSBC students? Oh, yes, it is. And early Dianeticists, Scientologists who have, yes, it's very true. L. Ron Hubbard was a gross plagiarist and thief of ideas, from the study tech to listing and nulling to date locate to, these are just procedures in Scientology, if you're familiar with Scientology, auditing procedures. These are very, very involved techniques that L. Ron Hubbard claimed he came up with, and he lied through his teeth. He didn't come up with this stuff. There was all kinds of administrative procedures as well, right? The graphs and the system of management. I mean, shit, the whole data series could have been ripped off from somebody for all I know. But there are documented online, you can find write-ups from people who Hubbard ripped off, writing it all down. There was an extensive set of writings done by a Peter, somebody, if I remember right, years ago. You can find this stuff on ex-Scientology message board or on Xenu.net. If those sites are still around and accessible, you can dig those up, and you can find stories about just one after another of techniques and methods that Hubbard ripped off. The study tech is just completely taken from a couple of people the burners who came and talked to L. Ron Hubbard and said, hey, we came up with this really great stuff about how to teach people things, and maybe you should use this in teaching auditors. And the next day, Hubbard's lecturing about he's the one who came up with all this, misunderstood word tech, because he was studying photography and developing study tech from his knowledge and learnings of photography. Total horseshit. He made all of that up. None of it was true, right? He just ripped them off. And then he said he was the one who came up with it. And within a year, he had kicked those two people, the burners, out of Scientology, declared them suppressive so they couldn't tell anybody what he had done, right? That's Hubbard. And it was from the very beginning. Hubbard said, never believe a hypnotist, as Jon Atack loves to say, right? He quotes him. Hubbard said, never believe a hypnotist. And then Hubbard, in the same time period, is going on and on about how he was a hypnotist and how he was a master hypnotist, and and there's these hypnotic techniques in Dianetics, but it's not hypnotism, because in hypnotism they put you to sleep, and in Dianetics we wake you up. So that's why it's not hypnotism, see? Like, literally, that's what he said. That was his best argument for why Dianetics is not hypnotism, right? Because it wakes you up, doesn't put you to sleep. I mean, you just can't make this stuff up. It's so fucking stupid, right? But that's how Hubbard would approach this stuff. Pretty stupidly. Oh, hey, Cassie's Corner. Okay, good. Thanks for throwing this into the comment box or question box. The Hollywood locations on Sunset have security guards, but they don't appear to be armed. Should we be concerned the security guards will use force against the speedrun kids, or is that more so only? And then she also writes, should be concerned about the safety of the speedrun kids, or is it only a danger in highly secure places like Gold Base, although the Hollywood locations have unarmed guards now? Okay, you should be concerned. The reason why you should be concerned is because Scientology is an unreasonable, destructive cult. These are not people who have their head on straight. Scientologists are ramped up right now. They are terrified of what is going on, and they are pissed off. And they want some retribution. They want some get back. I'm telling you, that is absolutely where their head is at right now. They are pissed. And they are dying to hurt you guys. They want to hurt you guys badly. I don't know, Cassie, if you're one of these TikTokers, you're just asking, but when I say you guys, I'm talking about the speedrunners, right? These kids who are doing this. The Scientologists desperately want to hurt them. So if they can come up with any excuse whatsoever to do so, they will. You have got to understand the situation. They are a paranoid, destructive cult that has been thriving on conspiracy theory for decades. They are not rational people in a rational headspace who follow the law. The law is optional to Scientology. The law is only useful to them when they can use it against people who are attacking or criticizing them. Otherwise, Scientology doesn't give two fucks about the law, and they will gladly and happily violate it by beating the shit out of you if they get the chance to. You have to know that. And it's just an accident waiting to happen at this point. I'm surprised it hasn't happened yet, to be honest, but it could happen at any moment. And if a physical confrontation occurs between Sea Org members or Scientologists and these kids, the video is going to get lost. There won't be evidence. It'll be he said, she said. And they will have tons of depositions filed with the courts, telling the courts their version of events, and it will outnumber any TikTokers, right? They will spin every single piece of reality in their direction, and they will overwhelm the legal system with that because they have the money, time, and resources to do that. And there isn't a single person who's doing a speed run who has any idea the resources that could be leveled against them when they take on Scientology. This is life-changing, life-threatening stuff. I have to talk about it that way if you're going to ask me directly, because I have to be honest with you that is the situation. It's a big game. It's all funny, ha ha, look at the stupid Scientologists. Right? I don't want to see people get hurt. And I'm telling you, these guys in the Sea Org right now are just, give me any excuse to beat the fuck out of you. Right? So the security guards are tuned up, and I don't know that they are armed. I doubt it. The security guards we had in PAC generally were not armed. But they got a gun case, right? They got a rifle cabinet. They do have access to weapons, and they will not hesitate to use them if they believe they are defending life and limb or property of Scientology. So, something to know. Okay, enough said. Gotta hurry up here. We got a number of questions, and I've got 8 minutes to do it. All right, so Frangie, possibly you have answered this in the past. Planning to create an audiobook version of book 2. Yes, it's happening right now. I am recording the audiobook for this right here, and I will be getting that out by June is the target date for that. So I've got to get hustling because it's May 3rd, and I got a lot of reading to do. So yes, that is happening. XJW, do you think the Denver org and orgs worldwide will have young people running inside them? Yeah, I think that this is being encouraged, and I think we are going to see more of these speedruns before we see this flounder or dissipate. Yeah. And like I said, it could morph into something better. That'd be interesting. But it would look very, very different if it did. The speedruns have got to stop. It's illegal and just not a good thing to do. Matt, you worked with 3 people, Peter Boghossian, James Lindsay, Andrew Gold, who all became MAGA. Yeah, I had them on my show. That's true. What did you learn from their respective descents from the alt-right rabbit hole? Any warning signs? Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Matt. This deserves a much longer answer, but I'm going to be real super brief because I'm trying to get the last of the questions done today. The alt-right pipeline, as they say, is real. You can go down any rabbit hole on the internet and end up in a very different headspace than when you started. This is how flat earthers are made. This is how MAGA are made, right? This was how QAnon happened. And everybody thinks they're the exception. And I'm here to tell you that from a professional perspective, when I understand and tell you about coercive control and how it works, that it works on you, because it works on everybody. It's just a matter of what the triggers are. Do they trigger you? Do they get the right hit for you, right? And it's not that the techniques don't work, it's that the triggers have to work, right? And so if you're going down an alt-right pipeline, you may start very firmly in a left-wing ideological camp, but one little thing, wait, what? Introduces what's called FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Those are the makings of putting a person onto and down this pipeline, is fear, uncertainty, and doubt. If I can create in you a fear, an uncertainty, or a doubt about your beliefs or your ideas or your ideology, I'm destabilizing your ideology, right? Just one little thing. Wait, what? Did I get that wrong? Was that wrong? Was I lied to? What does that trigger? Betrayal. And the second you start feeling betrayal, well, what does this other side have to, wait, what? They betrayed me? What? And it doesn't even have to be true, right? It could be false. It could be true. It could be a real betrayal or a false one. Doesn't matter to the mind of the person who is now being converted to this new way of thinking, right? This is how it happens. And any of these pipelines offer mountains of things that are designed to create fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And as soon as those bells start ringing, right, it's like you're being called down this other path. And the more you learn, the more you're learning about your betrayal, the more interesting and the more like emotionally impactful it becomes. And you're like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, right? Like you just keep being given this information and it sounds more and more, it's less and less reasonable, but you're accepting more and more of it. So you're buying into this new way of thinking, new way of reasoning things. And before you know it, you're down the alt-right pipeline, right? And that's the anatomy of it. And yeah, it happened to very, very, very smart people that I engaged with who had very, very different non-alt-right things to say when I talked to them. I mean, Peter Boghossian's the guy who came up with street epistemology. I mean, that's like pretty amazing. That's pretty cool stuff. Street epistemology is a wonderful technique, but now he's bastardized it into something horrible, right? And other people have actually taken his work and gone off in some pretty rational directions with it and really made some interesting studies out of it. And if you don't know what street epistemology is, check it out because it's really useful stuff. But Peter's gone, man. He is just, I don't know who he is now, but he's not the guy I talked to years ago. And it's really quite sad, to watch that happen. Okay, Cassie, any guess as to why the cult hasn't successfully pressed charges on the speedrunners yet? What's the strategy here? Because it takes time, right? The legal system is a slow system. Just look up Anonymous. Look at how they prosecuted people who were involved with Anonymous in the day. Because people did go to jail. And you'll see it took months. Right? It takes a long time to build a case, get evidence, get the prosecutors to do what they're going to do. But don't think that because nothing's happened so far that nothing's happening. That's the important thing to know, right? Scientology plays the long game. And this is an inconceivable thing to most kids. And again, this is not judgment. I'm not like, you're just a bunch of idiots because you don't know this. I'm trying to say, young people aren't known for thinking long-term consequences when it comes to games and gamemanship. And when you're in this kind of LARP mode, then it's all fun and games in the moment and nothing immediate happens, so nothing's going to happen. No, that's not how this works. Scientology is going to come knocking on your door 5 or 6 months from now when all of this is gone and suddenly your life is going to fucking suck, right? And I'm not saying you, Cassie. I'm just saying the person who's going to be at the receiving end of Scientology's prosecution. They're collecting evidence, building their cases, biding their time, and hoping that this goes away before it gets worse. That's what Scientology is hoping. But don't think that the inaction that's happening right now on the legal front means that they are not very actively gathering identification information and investigating the people who are doing this. They know who they are. They know what their names are. They know who their families are. They know who their families work for. They know everything about those kids right now. You have got to assume that that's the case, because it probably is the case. What is the data protection officer, and what do they do in a Scientology org? Sounds like an OSA post, but I don't know. I have to see it on the org board. Oh, damn, it's 2 o'clock. I got to wrap up. You mentioned 9/11 when answering my previous question. What was Scientology's reaction to 9/11? Did the fellow staff talk about it? We all talked about it. It was a nuclear bomb in Scientology, just like it was outside of Scientology. 9/11 was the most impactful external event that's ever happened to the Sea Org that I was aware of. That was a completely external thing. It had nothing to do with Scientology. But it hit Scientology just like it hit everybody else. It was a big deal. But it was only a big deal for about a week. And then we moved on. Board Black Sheep, is Scientology pro or against abortion? Depends on the context. If you're trying to leave the Sea Org, they are very, very, very pro-abortion. They want you to have an abortion and stay in the Sea Org. Otherwise, they're fine with you having kids. They don't have a thing on it one way or the other. Okay. All right, Miss Tara Green, I saw your comment, but I'm not going to throw it on screen because we got to wrap up. Okay, folks, I always try to wrap up by 2 o'clock because Mark and Claire and the Aftermath show go on. So I'm going to go off now. Thank you very much for coming around, listening to me blabber on for 2 hours. I hope my answers were okay. I know they were a little all over the place. Like I said, I was a little ranty today. But I hope that I was able to offer something that was informative, educational, and entertaining. That's always the effort here. I'll see you guys soon. Bye-bye. Doink. Doink.